plenty of time for questions and discussion. But of course, in the organic crop production, we don't use any seed treatments other than legume rhizobium inoculant on legumes. The standards don't permit fungicide treatments or neonicotinoid treatments. And so from our standpoint, it's kind of hard to understand why.
So
I mean, it's not a big imposition to be able to not be able to use those seed treatments.
yeah. So are the inoculates for legumes, are most of those organic, or are there a few that are out there that are not?
You know, I'm not sure. The standards used to make us document that they were not genetically engineered varieties, but then they've kind of gotten away from that. So I don't think it's, you know, you can either get them in liquid form or with the, you know, in a kind of a peat moss type of medium, you know, for whether it be soybeans or clover, alfalfa, or peas of some sort.
Okay.
So that's not it used to be kind of a big issue with certification, but not anymore.
Well, if you want to go ahead and start talking about
Okay.
organic. Yeah, so this is Ed Reznicek.
Yeah, I live and farm Nemaha County near the town of Goff. Met Spencer here a couple of years ago, and the Kansas Rural Center Conference, got to know Spencer some, and I'm glad to be able to visit with you today. I think it'll be enjoyable. I thought what I would do is talk a bit about my own history in farming, thinking students looking for making your way into agricultural careers somehow, maybe it'll be interesting, or gather something from somebody else's experience. And then I thought I'd talk a bit about the history of organic farming in Kansas and Kansas organic producers. And then with that, kind of cover the current status, which is quite interesting to me, and then leave it open for questions and discussion. I grew up on a farm in central Kansas in Marion County. 64 years old, born in 1952, graduated from high school in 1970. So I was, since 6th, 7th grade, involved in farming activities. And it was a very diversified farm. We had chickens for both egg production and our own meat production. We milked about 10 to 12 cows. When I was small, we did some farrow to finish hogs. We had cows and beef cattle, also finished some beef, usually finished about a semi-load a year. And we raised wheat, oats, corn, milo, alfalfa, put up native grass hay. I had 9 brothers and sisters. There was a sizable labor force in the family, and my folks utilized it, and it was a fun way to grow up. I never intended to go into farming. In high school, my main interest was in building hot rods. I had several old classic vehicles I wish I would have kept. But I learned mechanic work kind of on my own, and kind of apprenticing myself to a couple of local mechanics. And that knowledge served me well when I was starting my own farming operation, because I could buy used equipment and I could fix it up and repair it and keep it going. So that skill over the years saved me lots of money. I was out of high school 2 years before I went to college, and I went to Emporia State. I got a degree in philosophy, minor in German. My plan at that point was to make a career in academia, teaching. From there, I started a graduate program in philosophy at KU. During that time, I met my wife at Emporia. she'd come off a farm in Nemaha County, where we are now. While I was starting graduate school, her dad was struggling with cancer. We were going up there every weekend to help her mother out, and decided that I really didn't think I wanted a career in teaching. I enjoyed working outside. I liked the intellectual stimulation, but I liked the physical activity as well. So we moved up there and decided we were going to see what we could do for work, and if we could work our way into operating that farm. And that's what we did. One of my first jobs there was as a paralegal working at a legal services organization. I was representing clients in Social Security disability cases, food stamps, had one black lungs benefit case. And in the early 80s, we started seeing farm credit problems developing. I don't know if there was the farm credit crisis of the mid-80s. During the mid to late 70s, the idea was that land prices were never going to go down. They were only going to rise. The Russians were buying wheat. We had to feed the world, and farmers should go all out production. And the 1980, when the Russians moved into Afghanistan, which that fiasco is still going on, the United States imposed the grain embargo on the Russians. They quit buying wheat. Surplus of grain on the market, prices plummeted, and as farmers geared up for production, they took on a lot of debt, buying new equipment, buying more land. Interest rates peaked at about 18% in 1981, and as a paralegal working in public benefits programs, the Farmers Home Administration was the public agency that was basically implementing farm credit policy for the federal government. And I started representing farmers struggling to get debt restructuring relief from the Farmers Home Administration. So that got me involved in the farm credit system. I didn't have a background in farm finance. I did got me a textbook on farm finance. I got the loan officers to teach me the standards they were judging loan applications by. And so you never know where you can find good teachers. They're not always in school. They're all over. And so when you've got something you want to learn, keep an eye out for them, because they're probably out there. So I did that through the 80s. I also did work through this work I did through the Kansas Rural Center. Did the credit counseling, credit advocacy work. And as farmers struggled to deal with debt, one of the issues was that they couldn't always get the operating loans they needed. So if they were going to farm, they needed to find ways to produce crops without the operating loans. Some of the organic practices would allow them to do that. The greater use of systematic good crop rotations, the systematic inclusion of legumes, particularly forage legumes, in cropping systems is a good way to produce nitrogen. There was the interest, and this has changed a lot, was the availability of public seed varieties. At that time was pretty readily available. Wheat, particularly wheat and soybeans. You could keep your own seed and replant it, which was completely legal. It's much more limited now. Although there's still some public varieties out there that are pretty good.
Just because there's less on the market, because as we move to GMOs, a lot of it's
Right.
patented.
There's a lot of the plant variety protected varieties. GMOs are all like that, and then there's some others that are like that as well. During that period, farmers actually went to producing more wheat and soybeans because they were cheaper crops to plant. Soybeans were cheaper because they didn't have to apply nitrogen, extra nitrogen. The cereal grains like wheat, after harvest, leave a nice window for a forage legume. Would be a red clover, or if you want, and some implemented more use of alfalfa. And Kansas Organic, so there were farmers that were looking at ways to reduce production costs and reduce the need for operating credit.
And could you define forage legumes?
What?
Could you define forage legumes or?
Alfalfa, red clover,
And they're-
perennials, biennials. I mean, soybeans can be used as a forage crop. It's like alfalfa, it's not an expensive crop to plant. There's almost always a good market for good quality alfalfa hay. Or if you've got cattle, you got the use of the crop in your own operation. Once you've got it established, it's a perennial. You can go. There's not a lot of operating inputs that it takes. It does take certain investment in machinery in order to the swathers, the balers, the equipment to haul hay and so forth.
I have a question on forage legumes. Could they use it? So they're like a nitrogen fixing plant?
Yes.
So could you use it as a green manure?
Yes, in the organic, they'd use it as a green manure. One of the differences between the way organic farmers use like alfalfa, and we had it on our farm, but we didn't use it quite the same way. The tendency in typical farming operation was to plant it and keep it there as long as possible. And what the organic farmers would do is would leave it in for maybe 3 years and then use it as a green manure crop. So on an organic farm, every year you were planting new alfalfa and you were taking some of it out. And it's a good nitrogen fixer. And it could produce a good corn yield. And it was good in front of alfalfa, or in front of wheat, if you wanted to do it that way. Some people would take it out maybe in July and then go to a wheat crop in mid-September. They'd plant their wheat crop. Kansas Organic Producers had its start in the mid-70s, and that was farmers that did not like the direction they saw agriculture going. In the mid-70s, it was all-out expansion. The use of pesticides was becoming much more prevalent. Farms were expanding in size substantially. I can remember that era. There's neighbors, where they had share rental agreements with the retired landlord, found that they had neighbors coming in and offering cash rent sometime. So it's a real competitive kind of atmosphere that some farmers found pretty distasteful. And then I think some of the things that, and with the new practices, with better machinery, heavier use of fertilizers, more use of pesticides, farmers saw the cost of production increasing. Some of them, were really uncomfortable with that. And some of those had already established strong crop rotation systems that they were getting, decent production from. And so I remember some stories. Those guys are mostly gone now, but they tried it and didn't see that they had any advantage over the extra cost, so they just stuck with their old crop rotations. They did adopt, every 2 or 3 times a year you read the story, organics, 40 acres and a mule, and if we ever went that, half the world's population would starve. This is not a fair characterization of organic farmers. They were ready to adopt the mechanical technological improvements on, diesel tractors, good hydraulic systems, good power steering, good brakes, some increase in size of equipment. They were ready to adopt those things, and they did. In fact, there was an early study on organic agriculture published under Ag Secretary Bob Berglund, called published in 1980. Let's see, how was it? Report and Recommendations on Organic Farming. You can find it in the National Agricultural Library under USDA. It's a kind of a short study. One of the farmers that was studied was a Northeast Kansas farmer. And what they said was that there was a variety of environmental, economic, and social reasons that farmers adopted organic practices. They adopted the improvements in mechanical technology. And they were not technological laggards or anything of that sort. At that time, there were not certification programs or organic price premiums. When Kansas Organic Producers first organized in the mid-'70s, it was basically a social and network farmers and others interested in organic sharing information on production practices, holding farm tours, and discussing what standards there might be so that they could develop a market for organic production. The standards started to take shape in the late 80s. There was one chapter formed in Kansas, 1988, out in the Marienthal, Kansas area. A group of farmers out there put together Heartland Mill, a flour milling business, and they organized a certification chapter to certify those farms that were doing that. We organized a chapter in eastern Kansas in '89. It was the first year we certified some farms. And it really took the certification program and putting together a inventory of organic product in order to get the market going. The first crop our chapter sold in 1989 or 1991 was alfalfa seed. 1991 was a drought year, serious drought year. But those kind of years are really good for seed production. So we harvested a lot of alfalfa seed. And we sold it mostly for sprouting, and then we sold some of it for reuse for planting. The first good grain market that developed, organic grain market, started in about '93, and the Japanese were interested in organic soybeans for tofu production. And we started selling organic soybeans for export to Japan. And that market, I think we started out getting $14 a bushel for the soybeans when the conventional soybean price was about $4.50. So there was a significant price advantage. We reorganized Kansas Organic Producers as a cooperative in 1992. It's organized as a marketing bargaining cooperative. We're not like the co-op elevators. Members store grain on the farm. Through the certification process and communication with members, we start acquiring production data in terms of how many acres they got planted. And then as harvest occurs, they send in samples, we do quality tests, and convert those acre inventory to bushel inventory. And then the co-op takes that information to potential buyers, negotiates sales, arranges shipping, and receives payment and settles with producers. The co-op operates on what we call a market service fee. We started out at 5% of sales. Currently, we're at 6% of sales. Now here, 5 years ago, we purchased a soybean processing plant across the Kansas-Nebraska border in Du Bois, Nebraska. We make organic and non-GMO soybean meal and oil and extract oil up there. Our membership, we've got about a third of our membership now in Nebraska. A few, in bordering in Missouri, and some over in Colorado. And we don't have a central office. I work out of my job is as general manager. I work out of a home office. We have 2 full-time marketing positions. One full-time marketer works out of a home office in Lucas, Kansas. And then we got a husband-wife team, share a marketing position. They work out of Minneapolis, Kansas. We got a bookkeeper accountant that works out of a home office near Bremen, Kansas. So, it's you're not quite as restricted in terms of finding the talent you want when they can be more dispersed. And with the online things you can do, the internet, farmers with cell phones, of course telephones yet, that kind of dispersal has few problems. It works pretty well. There's been really strong growth in organic grain markets the last several years. Wheat for food use, for human consumption. There's growing market for food corn. We sell a few more bushels every year of food corn. There's a growing market for grain sorghum for food use, non-glutinous flour. Actually sell quite a bit of millet, some of it for food. Some of it's used in pet foods, and we've got some poultry customers using it in layers. The big growth in feed grain use is coming in organic eggs and in organic dairy. When prices get real high, the dairies will scale back on grain use. The ones that are best able to weather some of the ups and downs of the market are the family-run dairies in the upper Midwest that have a strong forage and grazing component in their dairies. But there's also some really large, CAFO type of dairies and laying operations that are really dependent on buying organic grain. One of the interesting things is the Amish Mennonite communities are moving more to the Midwest, and a lot of the growth in dairy and egg production is coming on these Amish Mennonite farms. They are not, some of these are 20,000 bird laying houses. In Missouri, you see it a little bit in Kansas. There's a lot of growth in eggs and dairy going on in Colorado, both east of the Denver, Colorado Springs area, and even also over on the western slope. We have customers for feed in Colorado, in Texas, New Mexico. There's a lot in California, Idaho, Washington, which we don't get into those markets much. We compete from some big feed operations in the upper Midwest for the Missouri markets. Organic soybean production in the U.S. is way short of what the demand is. What the information we get is about 70% of the organic feed soybean use is imported, and about half the corn. There's a lot of the wheat that's used is also imported, but then a big chunk of that comes from Canada, so it's not quite the same thing. The soybeans are coming in from China, India, Moldova, Romania, Ukraine. Heard of some coming in from Russia. Corn, some of that's more coming in from southeastern Europe, Romania, Moldova, Ukraine. That part of Europe is those, I don't know, maybe you've covered it in soils classes, the Chernozem soils, the black soils of western Russia, southeastern Europe, flat land. I don't know if this is true, organic matter up to 15%. These are some prime farmland for organic grain.
Is that better than Iowa?
I think it is. It's a fairly Russia. I've go online and Google organic grain production in Russia, and there's here recently Putin said they see a future in developing organic agriculture in Russia. They think it's going to be a good thing. There's a strong health consciousness in Russia, so people are interested in from that sense. And from what I understand, there's a lot of unutilized farmland in Russia. It's a big area, and they've relying on imports has been something they've done for a long time, and that appears to change. There's the big ag and food corporations in the U.S. are entering the organic market in a much bigger way. Walmart's one of the biggest users, marketers of organic eggs and dairy. And I think they're expanding vegetable lines. Costco's got big expansion plans. One of our main wheat customers is Ardent, which is a formation by ConAgra, Cargill, and Cenex Harvest States. They're conducting meetings trying to recruit more farmers into organic grain production. Some of these companies are offering multi-year contracts for a transition period. Various Organic Valley, I think, which is a cooperative organic dairy that's been around since the late 80s. They've gone from 100 million to a little over 1 billion in gross annual sales probably in the last 6 or 7 years, maybe 10 years. Huge growth. We had our KOP annual meeting here a month ago. We had some discussion that it seems that we're entering a new era in organic agriculture when we look at the demand and the imports. As these imports have come in over the last year, we've seen decline in prices. These markets are often chaotic. I've worked in organic markets for many years, and I'm not one prone to predict. You better be ready for surprises, because there usually are some. I don't think it's just the organic market. I think it's typical. I think there's a lot of irrationality in markets. There's a need for more organic farmers. Some of what we've heard is that there's organic agriculture bigger in Europe than here. We hear that grain coming in from Southeast Europe. We ask, is the European market saturated? And the answer is no. We ask, and we've developed some contacts in Moldova, and some traders who've been over to India and China. Ask them, do farmers get paid a premium? And the answer is no. Those farmers in India, Moldova, Romania are not getting paid a premium. We saw a story we did recently. We've developed internet contact with the organic grain and dairy producer group in UK, similar to ours. And so we've initiated some internet contacts, and we may be doing figuring out how we can do more direct member-to-member contacts. We'd like to know more. We'd like to know what's going on with cooperative development in Europe and India and so forth. I think farmers in those areas, much like when organic started here, have interest besides just the price premiums. In those Southeast European countries, inputs have never been reliably available. They don't want to have to borrow the money to buy them and use them. And I think there are more traditions of diversified farming than what we have here typically now. So I think they're doing it because of its lower cost. They consider it lower risk. They still know those more traditional cultural practices of crop rotations, systematic use of livestock manure, systematic use of legumes, and they don't like the exposure to pesticides. And they consider it's family health as part of it. Over time, that will probably change. I think the premiums will, as they learn what's going on internationally, I would expect those farmers will start to get organized and be able to obtain some premiums. which we hope they do too, because that'll be in our interest. With that, any other questions? I don't have other remarks I plan to say, but depending on your questions and discussion, I can say more.
Do you guys kind of focus on more grain production, or do you do anything with like fruits and vegetables?
Are you guys horticultural students?
Yes.
Our co-op focuses primarily on grain production. We don't really do much with fruits and vegetables. I think, the challenges for young people entering agriculture is how do you get started with limited access to land, capital, and credit. And we gauge the efficiency of agriculture by how many acres one farmer can farm. And we don't have enough people on our farms. These grain farms we have could be much more diverse. We could add poultry to them. We could add more intensive grazing of beef cattle. We could add hoop house production and vegetable production. But we need people who can do those enterprises and do the marketing that requires. Yeah.
There's a program in the Veterans VA, Veterans to Farmers.
Right.
They're starting it here in Kansas in 2 years. So you might have more. Some people are interested. I am too. So.
Well, we need to get. I'd like to see some of the vegetable production and the smaller scale livestock production and direct marketing taking place on some of these same farms that are doing grain production. Mm-hmm. That would be a way to give people like you access to land. Mm-hmm. There is machinery on those farms that could be utilized in vegetable production. Mm-hmm. There's manure maybe available. There could be composting. There's a lot of resources that are already on these farms that could support vegetable, hoop house, small scale or smaller scale direct marketing of livestock. There's one example I think is a pretty good one in central Illinois, and they've got a website. It's called Prairie Earth Farm. That's PRAIRERTH. So one word, prairie. They use the E at the end of prairie, and they leave off the A. So PRAIRERTH, Prairie Earth Farm. There's I saw one article on them. One article talked about a 400-acre organic grain and beef cattle farm. Another one talked about 300 acres. There's a son and daughter-in-law came back to the farm and began CSA, hoop house production, vegetable production. I think there was another son, teenage son, that started taking on the pasture hogs and stuff. But it's a real diversified farm, and they operate a CSA out of it. They're not within 50 miles of very substantial urban areas, but there was kind of a picture of and then they hire some paid interns, some paid workers through the summertime, and then they'll do some interns. So they've got a farming staff at the height of production summer that probably is 8 or 10 or 12 people, which is different than many of our grain farms. Mm-hmm. So I think that we need to see more of that. We need more people on our farms.
So if you woke up tomorrow and your inbox is full of messages saying all of your member farms have like 2 more members, hypothetically, would you be interested in marketing like beef and eggs, or would you prefer like the individual farms to kind of handle that marketing themselves? We would probably look to those producers to
if we could help them organizationally some, we would try to do that. But it's very different than marketing grain. And so, I mean, if there were farms in an area, you know, there's maybe ways they could collaborate on marketing. You know, but that would be quite different than what we're doing. I mean, grains, you know, it's probably the easiest thing there is to market in terms of it stores well. You know, it's easy to ship in large quantities. I mean, we get calls, you know, can I buy 2 50-pound bags of organic wheat and maybe some corn that's been cleaned. It takes us more time. It takes us more time and money to market even a pickup load than it does a 850 bushel semi-load. So you know, our margin, we can operate with it. It doesn't, or even with good prices, our members don't want to see the co-op taking in too much money, and so they kind of put a brake on our market service fees, and so we don't, you know, have a lot of money to invest in other projects that may not generate, you know, revenue to cover the expenses. Yeah, you know, I think location can make some difference. There's some of the vegetable farms, CSAs. There's I can't think of the name, over by northwest of Americus, seems to do a pretty good job. He's got people coming out to the farm from some distance, Topeka, Emporia, I know Council Grove. I can't think of his name right now, but John, is his first name. I've been out to his farm. It was pretty, you know, pretty nice operation. Other questions?
So, is it mostly from rotation that they're able to raise grain organically, or do they like have livestock over winter for grazing?
The central Kansas and eastern Kansas, as you get into central Kansas, Nebraska, on east, more of the operations have beef cattle. And, you know, beef cattle have been a really good commodity, if you will. They've come down here in the last year, but I mean, there were record prices for feeder calves. The organic beef market has never really taken hold because I think the conventional market has been so strong. And if they're going to give them any grain, I mean, it's hard to pencil out feeding $12 corn to beef cattle. And especially when there was a demand for every kernel of that corn, you know, in some other market. And so some of the people that are doing production and marketing of organic beef are doing basically grass-fed or grass-finished beef. I've got beef cattle. I raise them organically, but I've not marketed them organically. The sale barn's been a good market, a quick pay, and that's something, if your customers aren't making money, then you need to be concerned about getting paid. And so the few outfits that were trying to make a go of grain finished organic beef had trouble paying for grain. So, you know, you're not in a hurry to go there if you're selling grain. So I think organic beef will be more of a forage-based production system. Beef production historically has been a way to add value to cheap grain. When grain's not cheap, meat production takes a different form, starts to take a different form. Same thing is kind of with pork. Poultry, you know, are so efficient converting grain and eggs are, they always have been, and they may always be a source of relatively cheap protein. So I think eggs are going to always be a good product. That's around the globe. A few years ago, I think because of disease problems in chickens, Mexico had a shortage of eggs, and they had riots. And eggs will always be a big deal.
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
So how do one go into producing, you guys mostly grain, is there like an organization for organic farmers for vegetables, fruits? Or do we just contact you guys, or?
There's a Rolling Prairie CSA in the Lawrence, Kansas City area. I think they deliver to, I don't know how they're doing it now. They've been at it for probably 12, 15 years. And they, I don't know, they got a half a dozen members, and they're delivering into Kansas City and Lawrence, pickup sites. I think they do some of the farmers market things as well. Some of the, it might be worth taking a look at some of the Amish groups. In fact, I found this winter, Sunday afternoon, just seeing what I could find on the web. There's I'm trying to think where it is. There's an Amish organic vegetable cooperative. I don't know if they were in Indiana or Illinois, something like that. It's kind of just my observation for whatever it's worth. When you have a group marketing effort, whether, like thinking cooperatives, you got to have a way to, you impose some discipline on yourselves to work together. That's what cooperatives try to do. In some ways, I think the Amish communities, there's real similar to cooperatives, but I think that discipline comes through their church. So there's a feed mill in Buffalo, Missouri that does, they process organic soybean meal, and they grind and mix complete rations mostly for layers. Man, they're supplying a lot of layers in western Missouri. I don't know if they get down into Arkansas or Oklahoma or Texas either, but and that's kind of organized through the church. In fact, there's the Hostetlers. It's kind of the family last name. Their relatives. I'm not sure of how their relatives. There's one out in western Colorado we supply some grain to. There's one's got a couple of soybean plants in Iowa. They got some family connections back in Ohio.
Wait, the Amish had soybean plants?
Amish or Mennonite, I mean,
Okay.
we don't even try to keep track of the different
Sure.
distinctions between them.
Sure.
We only embarrass ourselves. So we just kind of refer to the Amish Mennonite type of those communities. I mean, somebody's always splintering off, and maybe that's a good, I don't know what maybe there's a biological basis for it. Just.
I've heard they do. They have to move people around.
That's right. I think as they get areas get limited possibilities for buying land, they send off others to start other communities. I don't have any good answers. Vegetables are some of these they do auctions, vegetable auctions over in Missouri. Wholesale type auctions on vegetables. So I don't know how those function.
Okay.
You guys are going to have to be the pioneers on this.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I think Whole Foods buys organic, but that's
Whole
probably-
Foods is yeah. I don't know if Dillon's, I think, it's got a pretty good section. There's I think a lot of the upper end grocery stores are trying to develop as large and diverse organic section in their stores as they can. I've got a son who's going to school out in Golden, and there's went to the farmers market there one Saturday this fall, and there was somebody from southeast Kansas with grass-fed beef there. But there were a number of farms east of there, bringing vegetables into the Golden Farmers Market. Pretty good market. I think that whole You know, I've had people tell me that whole Denver area is a mecca for young people. And I mean, there's a really growing organic market in that area. There's actually, let me see, what's the name of it is, out of St. Francis, Kansas. You know, the last county before you hit Colorado, on Highway 36. Our marketing cooperative, they formed High Plains Co-op, I think it is. They're marketing vegetables and eggs and meat into the Denver area. Nelson Poultry Farm over here in Manhattan, building a feed mill out in Hudson, Colorado. They've got, you know, they produce pullets over here, but they're expanding organic egg production out in Colorado. They have their feed mill. I think they might have some production there. We're hoping to get a contract for soybean meal and corn for them. We've been making soybean meal, delivering it to a plant 5 miles south of our plant, Valley View Milling, that built that mill in the last 10 years, produces feed mostly for confined hogs, conventional hogs, in the northeast Kansas, southeast Nebraska area. They're also certified organic. They produce a lot of organic feed for MBA Poultry, which produces smart chicken, broilers. Excellent product. I think, you know, one of the main things, the distinct things, is it's a air-cooled chicken instead of water-cooled, so the bacterial contamination risk is much lower. And it's a good product. But they produce organic feed for that operation, and we've been selling them soybean meal that they're putting in feed and shipping complete layer rations for Nelson Poultry Farm out to Colorado. But Nelson's gonna have their own mill out there, so we've got a lot of organic corn production in western Kansas, which would be well placed to serve that market.
So you mentioned how in Southern Europe farms are really diversified, or
It varies, you know.
Right.
There's in the western Kansas area, you know, for fertility they rely a lot on the feedlot manure, what they call conditioned feedlot manure, beef feedlots. Some of those, you know, and there's a mix of irrigated land and dry land out there. Some of them have been applying about 15 ton of this conditioned manure every 3 years, every third year. And some have been doing it for 20, 25 years. Our co-op, we've tested the wheat and the corn for quality. I mean, really good quality grain. Heavy wheat, high protein, heavy test weight corn. There's a lot of times that corn meets food corn markets want a large kernel, heavy test weight. There's a lot of that corn meet those criteria. You know, I don't know how sustainable that resource is, but you know, it sure shows the value of manure as a resource. I mean, it's really a really good soil amendment. You tend to see it more as a pollution threat than we recognize it for the good soil amendment it is. There's, you know, change going on out there, mostly associated with water. As water becomes less, irrigation water becomes less available, more expensive, we see these guys changing some of their cropping practices, bringing in a little more wheat. We've got some that are trying field peas for grain. You know, it's an excellent grain. It's an early season. You know, I think it's got a decent chance to work. Maybe planted the middle of February and harvested, you know, the end of June, and before it gets too hot. If it needs water, would need less water depending on what kind of winter they have. And we're hoping, peas are a really good nitrogen fixer. We're hoping that it'll help the wheat quality too. In time, that may replace some of the dependence on manure, maybe. Don't know.
And are those field peas going to human consumption or?
We have a member in southwest Nebraska that's been working on growing field peas for the last 4 or 5 years. This year he grew 8,000 bushels. He's getting pretty good at it.
Mhm.
And we sold that to a company in Iowa named World Food Processing. And they're selling it to another company in Canada. And a good part of this is they're doing the protein isolates. It's a heavily processed product. They're extracting the protein isolates and it's going into protein supplements. So, and we've contracted, the guys that are trying peas this year, we've contracted those acres to them for, we expect to have peas harvested in July and probably, hopefully start shipping by August.
Oh, so that's where the pea protein comes from, those vegan milk replacements, or not milk replacements, vegan protein supplements.
The powders. And
Yeah.
whatever else.
It's
I'm not
usually
sure.
soy
There's probably
protein.
several uses of it then. I've heard, years ago I heard peas are a really good food aid crop because they don't have to be, unlike soybeans, they don't have to be cooked, to make make them digestible. Easy to handle, they're heavy, they're heavier than soybeans. So if you're gonna ship a heavy crop that's not full of water, is the ones, they're the ones that ship the best. Because you can get a lot of weight on and you reduce your per unit shipping cost quite a bit. Lightweight grains like oats or sunflowers are expensive to ship very far. I've learned more about shipping than I ever wanted to know. And I tell you what, it doesn't just happen.
So why is it that the lightweight are harder to ship?
Because you can't, on average, semi truck going down the highway is going to be hauling about 50,000 pounds of cargo. You can't get 50,000 pounds of oats on a semi grain trailer. And so the per bushel cost of those oats goes up. Corn, you're not going to fill the semi trailer and you're going to have 50,000 pounds. Barley, 48-pound test weight grain. You'll fill it up pretty good. Oats, in Kansas, we don't raise the heavy test weight oats because of heat, and so it's expensive to ship.
Because you can't do a semi that's.
You can't get 50,000 pounds on it, so the per bushel cost.
And you can't
Instead of
do
corn,
that.
you're going to get 850 some bushels on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oats, you're going to be down maybe to 800 or less.
And you can't split it like oats. You'll move oats and.
Well, you could,
Something
but
else.
there aren't and we do some of that. We ship some organic grain to New Mexico, and kind of a small poultry. He raises turkeys, organic turkeys, and he grinds feed for other small poultry producers. We'll send him 2 loads of corn, and then we'll send him half a load of corn, half a load of soybean meal, and we'll send it. We'll source the corn out of far southwest Kansas. The only place we got soybean meal is up in southeast Nebraska, so we'll pick up half a load of soybean meal, and then we'll distribute. We tried to locate the source of grain for sale as near to our customer as possible. If it's going east, we're gonna, come out of eastern Kansas. If it's gonna go to New Mexico, we'll try to get it up southwest Kansas. But we also try to distribute sales among our members. We don't empty somebody out before we go to the next one. So we've got to demonstrate to our members that we're treating them fairly. In a group marketing thing, that's real important.
Do you know how many members you have altogether?
There'll be 50 to 60 active members sell some or all their production through the co-op. Some don't sell all of it through us. Our annual sales would be 6 to 8 million. So, you know, it's not a big thing, but it's as a farmer marketing through the co-op, it lets you focus on the production, which is really where the money is in organic. It's in the production. Farmers that are doing a good job have done very well, and you know, the developing the physical capacity and the management skills to manage stored grains is important. Having facilities, you can get a semi in almost any weather. Grab, you know, space for a semi to turn around, gravel, good augers or elevator legs, and you know, and they vary across the spectrum. Some of them have really good facilities, and some, you know, don't. Technology, mechanical technology is the whole gamut. I mean, there's farmers using, you know, 24-row planters, GPS, all the latest gadgets, and there's farmers that use the older equipment and make it work, and some do it real effectively, and others maybe not so much so. Full range of brands. I mean, the mechanical side of it is really not that much different than conventional farmers.
And so, are you comfortable with the fact that organic has become increasingly industrialized? Organic.
Well, I think that's really the struggle. You know, that's where we are right now, is that, you know, there's some criticize, well, organic's not credible anymore because it's just become industrialized. That's not totally true. I mean, there's parts of it, you know, the confined animal feeding facilities, some of that bothers me. The Ardent, you know, is the biggest wheat milling operation in the country now. You know, if we don't deal with them, they'll go to farmers that will. We'll deal with them, but we're going to make sure we've got a long-term customer in North Carolina, Lindley Mill, been a KOP wheat customer for 20 years, produces high-quality flour products, really wants the high-protein wheat, supplies a big chunk of the market on the East Coast. He's our number one customer, and we're going to take care of him. Cal-Maine here in Stafford Mill or Hudson Cream Flour, I think it is. They do some organic. Farmer Direct is another co-op, has a flour mill in east of Salina. I can't think of the town right now. You know, they have some conventional wheat producing members, and their focus started out with white wheat. They've got conventional farming members that are looking at transitioning quite a few acres into organic. And so we'll probably lose some of our wheat market from them. But to have an effective organic crop production system, they're going to have other crops in the rotation. So our thinking is, you know, we're not going to hold it against them that they don't come to us for wheat maybe, but we'd like to market their other grains. Hesco has got some mills, one in Nebraska. They take the lower protein wheat, and they're doing some Milo for non-gluten flour. They process some Milo. They've got a mill up in South Dakota too, I think. There's some mills out in Utah. Central Milling, I think, is one of them. There's a lot of organic wheat production in Utah, but we market some wheat out of Utah too. Some years, this year we've been marketing some white wheat out of Utah. Some of it going clear to North Carolina. I mean, there's some of this stuff that's, you like to think of organic as environmentally sound, and man, there's some of it just makes a lot of miles down the road.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's not, when you're doing the business side of it, you don't always, you know, you can note the things that are contradictory and see if there are ways you can mitigate some of that. But once grain's on a ship, it is cheap to ship. Getting it on the boat, and then it'll be more money getting it to the boat than getting it off the boat to where it's going to go. And there's, you start looking at the globe, I did anyway, is what these shipping routes are. And the stuff coming out of Southeast Europe comes across the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. And there's Baltimore, there's ports in Virginia, in Houston. Chicago's a big one. And it just up the St. Lawrence, through the Great Lakes, brings it right into the middle of the country, unloaded at Chicago. There's a soybean plant about 100 miles from Chicago. Makes a lot of the soybean meal that goes to this egg production over in Missouri. And it's hard to compete with. Western India is where a lot of the grain production is. I think, that goes up the Red Sea into the Mediterranean, and then they can go, China is bringing it into the West Coast. Turkey, there's imported wheat and corn coming in from Turkey. That Southeast Turkey area, that's where one of the major areas of conflict in Turkey right now is in that Southeast Turkey area. So I've wondered, how is it that Russia can send organic grain over here when they're supposed to have economic sanctions against them? And it's probably the trading, it's probably the international trading companies, it's going through them, I would imagine. So there's opportunities for more organic grain production in the U.S. And we're going to see more of it. I wish I could offer you more useful information on the vegetable side of it. But I guess the main thing I'd like to leave you with that is, look for opportunities to partner with grain farms, organic grain farms. And, that could maybe give you easier access to land and some other farm resources that could, give you a leg up in getting started.
Would that sort of look like sharecropping or something like that?
I don't know, how you would, it might be, you provide I don't know if it'd be share, it might be a cash rent, or it could be some cash rent and in kind. You do the vegetables and you take on the direct marketing for the livestock that grain farm might be doing. And I think, there are probably countless possibilities. It's a real interesting time to be in farming.
Have you seen a lot of growth over the span of time that you've been with the cooperative, or have you seen a lot?
Our first, as a cooperative, the first crop was the organic soybeans to the Japanese. Really didn't have a market for wheat. Really didn't have a market much for corn. Some guys, could get stuff sold, but the soybeans got us started. I think the first year we marketed a couple $100,000 worth of soybeans. And
I have a question. How do you prevent cross-contamination from GMO crops?
Of course, the biggest challenge is with corn. The organic standards say you need to leave a 20-foot buffer strip. Well, when it comes to corn pollen, I like to tell people, in July, you can be sure you're breathing GMO corn pollen in Kansas because it'll go several miles and, it's going to be out there. Probably the best we can do is plant later. And we tend to do that, so plant in the warmer soils so nitrogen is more readily available, and it gives us another pass at the weeds, and it helps us reduce weed pressure, and the crop comes up quicker, and again helps with weed control. We test any of the corn that's going to be sold into the food market, and there may be I don't know, I haven't really tried to take a look. 15 or 20% of our corn may go into the food market.
Mhm.
That's all got to be tested, and it usually has to be under 1%.
Mhm.
Most of it will meet that. Once in a while, we have some that doesn't. We might have some up to 2 or 3% contamination, which is probably drift or, if you see a big spike in contamination, it's usually seed source. And then, but they can't, we're not going to prevent contamination.
Mhm.
And nature just doesn't keep things separate that much. It wants to mix it all up. But I think there are some, there's one of the major organic seed corn suppliers, a company named Blue River Hybrids.
Mhm.
They've been developed what they call pure maize.
Mhm.
Somehow there's a genetic block from crossing with other varieties. I think it was developed with popcorn.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of making its way into organic, field corn for grain production. And that, might offer some good possibilities. I mean, I hate to think of, one I'm mostly concerned about is GMO alfalfa seed.
Mhm.
I think that could really be a problem. Soybeans are self-pollinating primarily.
Mhm.
What Bill Shapaw tells me is that there's a little thrip that's got to go like hell to move about 3 foot in a day. And so the insect pollination is not a big threat. I think that's where alfalfa has a big threat, is the insect pollination aspect of it.
Mhm.
Like, you think it's just like
Some field borders can help us, leave the property boundaries, let them grow up into, in eastern Kansas anyway, some brushy fence rows, tree-lined fence rows. That can help you quite a bit. If you get more than, 2 weeks beyond when most of the corn is planted, that's a pretty good protection. It's not as bad as you would think, but it's there. In the feed market, nobody's, the organic standards don't require you test for GMO. Basically, the organic standards say you're going to do these kind of practices that will limit the potential for GMO contamination. Non-GMO seed, field borders, and cleaning out equipment. If people are doing what we call parallel production, there are farmers who do some conventional, they do some organic. And so the need to clean out planters, augers, wagons, grain bins, combines becomes real important.
Okay. On the organics and all that, do you need, like, I know with vegetables and fruits, do you need like beehives on your? I wonder if you need beehives on your. I know you don't do much.
Most of them
vegetable.
don't. There's a few that have bees, but
Mm.
most of them don't. But you'll see, when you're out there cutting alfalfa, I like to mix red clover, and I'll mix bursine clover in when I plant alfalfa, just to get a more diverse mix. If you got alfalfa weevil problems, they don't go after the red clover. Bursine clover looks a lot like alfalfa, except it's got a white flower. And here it behaves as an annual. It'll winter kill. Early vigor, good nitrogen producer, high quality feed, and again, just a little more diversity. But when you see the honeybees out there, when it's in full bloom, I don't know where they all come from, but
Oh, wow.
I've seen cutting red clover hay in September, year before last. Man, I saw a lot of monarchs coming through there. I wondered if I should quit. And I asked this Chip Taylor if they'll, utilize clover, and he said, yeah, they will.
I have a question on monarch butterflies. Do you know, or caterpillars, do they eat dill, or was that another caterpillar I saw?
I don't know on that.
Let's see,
Because I saw yellow and black.
Swallowtail, I think that's usually
Swallowtail.
on the fennel and dill and all those kind of things.
Okay, because I thought it was monarch. Someone said it, well, it wasn't a monarch caterpillar. It was the yellow and black.
I think they can, but it's more than likely the swallowtail. So.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions.
You guys probably know more than I do, but how creative you can get in initiating internet searches. I mean, it's I'm interested in cooperatively owned farmland, and so I've found one in just east of Vancouver, British Columbia. It's like a 90-acre farm. I don't forget how many shareholders there are. They lease it to 3 of them. I think there's 3, might be two couples and another adult, and they're doing a CSA, primarily a CSA. And the other member owners, it gives them access to organic vegetables. I think they may come out and work some, and they contribute to acquiring the land. I believe there's 3 households on there. So I mean, and I think it's like a 70 or 90 acre farm. And when you start getting more households, renewable energy starts to make more sense. Farming can be a lot of work. There's considerable financial stress. I've liked farming, but I also like the stimulation, the intellectual stimulation and social stimulation you get from doing other work as well. So I think farms ought to have 3 or 4 households on them. People can, they can develop some of their other interests and skills that can contribute to the farming operation, and they can share the farm work and some of the financial risk. And, there's other things. There's child care, there's elder care. I mean, I found another one in the Ontario, Canada area. They were just in the formation stage. I think that was called Organic Farm Cooperative. They were looking at land. Their goal, they had found a couple tracts that they were interested in. I think there were some in the 150 acre amount of land, close to a quarter section. Their goal was 100 members, 100 shareholders, paying $5,000 each. They had 30-some committed shareholders. When they hit 50, they were going to start working on purchasing the land. But 100 shareholders at $5,000 each is $500,000. That gets you in the game. And I think what they were looking at is leasing land to some of the shareholders. They would actually operate the land. I don't know how they would, so one of your concerns is, I'm going to put work into this, what kind of equity, how am I going to get equity? And so I don't know how they were, I suspect it's in the residence. If maybe you own the residence, maybe that is separated off, or maybe I'm not sure how they deal with it. I think there's a lot to figure out yet on how we would do cooperative, own and operate farms cooperatively. But to me, it looks like it could be a good option. As it is, every generation's got to buy the farm all over again. Mm-hmm. And it takes you almost 30 years. You finally pay it off and you're ready to retire. And, paying out that mortgage payment really takes a lot away from your capacity to develop the farm. That's money you could invest in developing the farming operation, or developing the marketing program, or whatever, so I think we need to be looking more at those, get a broader perspective on how we own and operate farmland. Otherwise, I think the hedge funds are going to own it, and we'll be working for them. And that doesn't sound like a good alternative to me.
Any other final questions, or?
think of something later, but.
Well, I've sure enjoyed visiting with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And, you know, good luck. You know, we don't have much of a KOP website. It does basically provides a narrative of kind of the history of our organization and provides contacts for our marketers and myself. And we may change the name of our organization because we've come to represent farmers besides just Kansas. So we're thinking Central Plains Organic Farmers Association. We may, I suspect we'll do that within the next year. So that's kind of, you know, that's kind of exciting. It's been interesting bringing in some of the Nebraska members. I mean, it's really amazing how that artificial state boundary changes the way people look at things sometimes. And we've gotten good, you know, collaboration. The guy raising peas in Southwest Nebraska, you know, he's willing to share that information. I mean, he'll, you know, that's one, you know, I think people that are attracted to cooperatives tend not to be ones who want to keep my secrets, you know, that I might get some distinct economic advantage from it. They're usually pretty willing to, here's what's worked for me, give it a try. If you got questions, let me know. I don't know if I can answer them, but, you know, we'll see what we can learn together. So. And one of the things I've found, sitting through countless meetings, everybody has strengths they bring, and they've got weaknesses they need help with. And it's a wide range. You know, the guys that are really good at production, you know, that's really important. You got to have production if you're going to have a co-op. And there's some that bring strong diplomatic skills. You know, there's some people that they don't say much, but when they speak, everybody else listens. And they usually have good ideas. And if, you know, they can bring that to a group. So I mean, that's one of the rewarding parts of working cooperatively with others is you see what people have to bring and what they need. Some people have money, you know, but they don't have very good practical knowledge of how to make a farming operation work. So you know, they need help with the farming, but their money can be useful to the group too. So.
Well, thank you again
Ah,
very much for
I enjoyed it.